following program on Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations. We would like to remind our viewers that the views expressed in this program by our participating guests are solely viewpoints of them who take part, and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network.
Welcome down to Gen XYZ right here on Derana 24. Well, today we're bringing to you a very unique flavor. We're talking about the Gen Zs. Now, this is a very different generation, also known as the I generation. Well, they've actually been the victims for the past few years, specifically in Sri Lanka, when it comes to the ripple effect of all of the economic crisis, COVID-19, we're talking about the Easter bombing, and we're talking about the government change as well. They've really been the victims at their prime. Well, today they're actually suffering with a lot of problems that they've actually faced, but they don't have a platform to really voice it and tell us exactly what the problem is. That is exactly why we've brought to you, well, Gen Zs. That's all I'm going to say, Gen Zs. We've actually brought them to you to tell you exactly what the problems are and what they need to voice out that are problems with the youth of Sri Lanka. Well, we're joining in with absolutely stunning individuals, by the way. We're glad to have you on board, because your age is, you're all from all the ranges of the ages. I'm not going to mention the age, okay? Don't worry. But you guys are actually the representation of Generation Z, right? Or the I generation. Now, I know there's a lot of factors when it comes to, problems that you guys have faced on your prime, because it is your prime, 18, 19, 20, your prime ages. And 2018, 2019, 2020, we've gone through the worst agendas in the country. We're talking about COVID-19. We're talking about soon after COVID-19, we recover. We're like, okay, we're all good. Economic crisis hits, And then again, it's the government change. It's so much that has actually gone through. And you guys have been in Sri Lanka, right? Right now, we've actually come to a little bit of a stable situation in the country, right? Not too stable. I want to know, we'll start from you, right? I want to know exactly what you think is a primary factor or a big problem in Sri Lanka that the youth and the Generation Z is facing.
Starting with back then when COVID hit, it was actually hard for us to adapt to the new normal, because classes were online, schooling was online. If we were too young, we could have able to adapt easily, or even if we were like fully grown adult. But this was in between. We were not too young or we were not too old to easily adapt for anything. It was out of nowhere, and we had no guidance, even our parents or teachers. It was new for everyone. So since then, it's been hard to, after that came the economic crisis. It's been hard since then, but also like the previous generations, they judge us a lot for what we've been going through so far. That's how
You find that being the problem?
Yeah.
Now, I found it very interesting. There's more.
Yeah.
There's more. But I found that very interesting because you mentioned that, right? You probably are in your 20s, 21, 22, 23, 24, right? But those were the ages that if you look in the previous generations, they've actually already achieved their lives. They're going on to marriage. They're going into, building their own houses at that age. But we are still figuring out what life is. Like, where am I? Who am I? We're still figuring that out, which we're supposed to figure out in our teens. But we didn't have the time because we were either fighting for the country's right or, fighting for the economic right of the people and the citizens of Sri Lanka. And they don't get that. The generation doesn't understand that. So what do you have to say with regards to that? I'm going to ask you that, Krishlani, because I feel like you have a bit more of a mature state of understanding because of these situations, right? So what do you think about that?
So basically, when our parents were going into their mid-20s or their late 20s, they had everything figured out. And by everything, I mean they had like maybe 2 kids and they had a house. And we're still like, where am I going to find a place to rent, or how am I going to finish my education, masters? But the thing is, our parents fail, and like the older generation, they kind of fail to realize that times have changed, priorities have changed, but also they continue to judge us based on their priorities they had when they were our age. And it's a bit difficult because everything from how we learned, like our higher education, our masters, like she said, we were doing everything online, and then we are still searching for opportunities. It's not that there is a lack of opportunities. There's so many opportunities in Sri Lanka, even with the problems that we're going through. But it's the fact that these resources, they're not available for everybody. But somehow, like, I feel like the older generation has grasped this point, but only to a certain extent. So it's basically, by the time you're 19, it's all about, oh, where are you going to go to university? What's your career? You need to have that figured out. What is your plan? And then when you go into your higher studies, they're like, okay, haven't you studied enough? Like, when are you going to get married? And then, like, are you single? Are you dating? Are you in a relationship? When is that happening? And if you tell them, oh, yeah, I am dating, so when are you getting married? Which is insane, which sounds insane for us, because we're still, I feel like, I don't know if this is like common, but we lost a good deal of our life during COVID. Like, it feels like those 2-3 years never happened. So, for example, if you're like 23, 24, but you still feel like 21 because you didn't live those years.
True. Yeah.
You couldn't do anything, you couldn't go out, you couldn't socialize. So that's what we are doing now. Like, we are going out with our friends, we are having fun, we are doing what we were supposed to do in our early 20s right now.
You're doing it now.
Yeah. So, but when we do that, they're like, I don't think you should be doing this now, you should be like figuring out your life. And we are actually trying to figure out our life through that. We need to catch on the experience, like catch up on what we missed out. So I think the older generations kind of don't understand that, and we get judged because of that. Yeah.
So have you personally, Krishlani, gone through statuses where, you know, your aunties, your punchipan, you know, all of that generation, I'm just going to say, you know, they come to you judging you, saying that, why are you not married? Isn't this time to get married? Have you faced that?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day.
And how do you navigate that?
Well, I try my best to be diplomatic about it as possible. I'm like, well, maybe marriage and having kids and having my life figured out isn't a priority. I'm just focused on being present in the moment, enjoying life, getting new experiences, and just, you know, figuring it day by day.
Right.
There is no... So my personal view is that you have no set timeline. Everybody is on a different timeline.
Yeah.
So it's okay to do things at your own pace. And nobody has to have their life figured out by a certain age. You could still be 40 and still change careers or find a new hobby, find a new interest, find a new partner. It's all perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So
I love that you mentioned that. And I see Inura on the side, by the way. He's nodding away. He's like, yes, I agree. So I'm going to come to you, okay? Now, in terms of this mentality that the generations have, right? It's like, because I feel like the Generation Z has a mentality of, I want to probably maybe get married, but I don't want to necessarily have kids, because why do I want to waste my time actually, you know, having kids when I can like focus on my life, make it better, be rich, you know, do that. So what is your take on that? Do you think, you know, this whole traditional mindset of maybe get married, you have to get married, you have to have kids, you have to have a house by this then, have grandchildren by this then. What do you think of that structure? Do you think that should change?
Well, one thing about our generation is we are pretty much self-conscious. No offense, but I think that's something you cannot see in other generations, right? So like, we always try to figure things out. We always try to understand who we are. So like, it depends actually. It depends from person to person. One might want to get married, one might not want to get married. So like, that's how it happens, because we always try to figure ourselves out, and we always try to see what is best for us. So that's why you feel like some people like want to do something while like some other people want to do something else, right? We always try not to conform to societal norms. We always try to try to do what is best for us. One might think that's
Selfish. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's not selfishness actually, because we all we always should do whatever is best for us, right? I mean, we should make sure that it is not harmful to the rest of the world. So how come it's selfish? Because doing what is best for us is not being selfish.
Okay. Now I find that a little contradictory.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to plow on that a little bit
Yes, sir.
because you mentioned the fact that thinking of yourself is not selfish. But if you think of yourself and yourself and yourself and yourself and only thinking about yourself as to what you want to do, isn't that a little being selfish? Because I understand what you're saying, right? You're not going to be a harm for the rest of the people. But then at the end of the day, if you think about it, you are being a harm to the economy of the country. If you don't reproduce, if you don't have a job by this time, if you don't pay your taxes by this time, own your own house by this time, you're not contributing to the well-being of the country economically. Now that is contradictory, isn't it? So isn't that still being selfish?
Well, like being selfish and being self-conscious are two different things.
No. No, not at all. Because see, what I mentioned is the fact that because you said, okay, this life, right, from the
Yeah.
earlier question,
Okay.
about you having your life, about you not getting married or following this structure, the reason there's a structure is because economically it is going to help the country you're living in,
Okay.
the country your future generation is going to live in, right? It's not just about the Gen Zs, it's also about the other generations
Yes,
that's coming up.
true.
2025 has launched a new generation. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think no matter what Gen Z individuals are doing, they are contributing to the economy to a certain extent. Is that
How
not
so?
true? I mean, okay, unlike previous generations, we always try to seek employment even while we are studying. Like we try to do part-time jobs and we try to maybe do online businesses. So I think we are contributing to the country's economy.
That doesn't answer the question. Because see, I'm sorry I'm prying on this,
Yeah.
right? Because I find it very annoying, to be honest, personally, right? When it comes to the factor of, yes, change the framework of what it is, but at the end of the day, about selfish and self-consciousness, it's pretty much the same thing if you think about it, right? Because I feel like this generation, personally, actually has that drive saying that, you know what, it's not selfish, but it is selfish because we've got a framework to support the well-being of the country, right? I'm going to let you stew and think on that a little bit, right? Because I'm going to move on to you because I feel like I can get a different perspective, right? What do you personally think on this?
I think what Inura is trying to say is we can't call it selfish, but just imagine your parents want you to get married when you don't want to get married. You, by getting married, you're putting yourself and the person you're with the same spot. It's not a successful marriage. Or just imagine you don't want to have kids, but your parents want. You're just bringing a life into this world where you're not prepared for that.
Right. It's not just about marriage now, is it?
Yeah,
it's
I'm
also
just
about
taking
getting
this as
an example. Right.
And if you talk about being selfish, there are a lot of youngsters who are leaving the country as well. After getting their free education from the government, I would say it'll be a bit nice if you can stay back, you can earn, support the country. And then if you so badly want to leave, maybe stay for 10 years and after your education and then you can leave and then you can settle down somewhere else. But I personally have a lot of friends who left their country, left Sri Lanka to pursue their education, to get careers, just because the other countries, they pay well and they can also afford their education, a good standard of living, and also they can support their families.
Right.
In that way, I think we can call that selfish, but not what... I would call this being self-conscious more than selfish.
Again,
Yeah.
you're mentioning something that I can actually I've a bit of a point that I want to point out there as well, right? Because you mentioned that being selfish. Yes, partially it is selfish, right? But at the end of the day, you're going to help another economy. You're still helping. You're not being selfish at at that point of things, if you think about it, right? We'll talk about a bit more on the other end. This is a very interesting conversation, but we're joining in with the youth of Sri Lanka, Generation Z, also known as the I generation. Well, we're joining in right here at Brew by Dilma, a beautiful location, by the way. It is located at Flower Road. Come by, have a cup of coffee. It's a brilliant place to really unwind. And with that, we'll be back just after a short commercial break right here on Gen X YZ. Welcome back to Gen X YZ, where we're in conversation with the youth of Sri Lanka, Generation Z, also known as the I generation. Now, we've obviously seen them, a lot of our generation, actually, or the millennials or the previous generation, look at them as a problem to the society. We also think that they're the end of, humans and the generations to come. But is that true, though? Or could it actually be a different mindset? They are the change of the future generations to come through. Well, that is exactly why we've got them here. And we're actually having a conversation with them as well with regards to what are these problems we're facing right here in the economy of Sri Lanka. All right? Now, we spoke something very interesting in the other one, and you pointed out something interesting as well with regards to, the generation, some of your friends as well, leaving the country. They are leaving the country because they're partially selfish. I'm not going to say they're not selfish. They're 100% selfish because the country they grew up in, the country they're bred in, everything, they're leaving it, for better grass or greener grass on the other side. I'm not blaming them for doing that because, we've gone through a lot in the country. Economic crisis, COVID-19, it's a ripple effect. You get annoyed. You get pissed off as a person who's actually youth. You're done with it. You want your life to start at one point, right? Especially with people judging. That is interesting that you mentioned that because that is called selfish, or that might not be selfish, right? But that's okay if you think about it because they're looking for greener grass. So what is your take on this? Do you still think, no, they're being selfish, no, they need to stay in the country?
No, if they want a better life, they can leave. That's perfectly all right. But what I'm saying is, if you call, on regards to what Inura said, if you call that selfish, how this is okay, is what I'm asking. If that's selfish, this also can be selfish, but that's not the point, I guess. So even the people who are leaving the country, they are leaving because of the economic crisis, yeah, I get that. In order to have a better life standard, a good income, good education, I get that. But being self-conscious is, I think, a lot different than being selfish. Being selfish is when you think only about yourself, right? I don't think...
Okay, because it's very contradictory and very interesting, right? I love this conversation because we're actually opening minds. We're actually having a conversation of changing ideations, right? That's interesting that you mentioned that because, see, what I meant by that was, we're talking about being selfish, right? Even though they're going to other countries, they're migrating to other countries for greener grass, it's also to establish their life, meaning they're able to pay taxes, they're able to establish their lives there, build a family there, build a home there, support the government wherever country they actually migrate to, as opposed to just thinking about yourself. Inra mentioned something, the fact that, even though we're studying, we're actually still, doing jobs and all of that. That is not the case. It does not support, that's for your pocket money. That's also, it doesn't really support the mega case of building the country, right? That's what I meant. But I understand where you're coming from. I understand that, you're coming from a different aspect of things as well, right? But I want to ask you personally, because you've had your friends leave the country, why are you guys really leaving the country? Are you leaving the country because you want to leave there forever? What is that aspect of things? Because I understand on a different note that, okay, they're leaving because they want to find greener grass. But genuinely, why do you think if you were to leave the country, why would you leave the country, specifically in Sri Lanka?
Personally, the finances, economic statuses of the country, if you just imagine you go to a grocery shop, you have to budget everything. You can see 5 products of the same need, but you have to budget everything according to, okay, this is cheaper and this is expensive. Okay, I'm not going to touch the expensive thing. I'm going to get the cheaper thing. You have to budget everything. Just imagine Okay, Gen Z as in, so the previous generations, they expect us to start a family by 25. So by 25, you have to get a house. How expensive is that? Get a vehicle. How expensive is that? Electricity bill, water bill, groceries. All this comes, when you calculate it together, that's going to be very expensive. I think that's the main purpose people are leaving the country. Also, because my friends who are in abroad, they can afford their studies by themselves. We can't. I am studying, and I'm depending on my mother. She feeds me, she educates me, she's doing everything for me. But looking at my friends, they're doing everything by themselves. They're studying, they're working, they're supporting their parents as well. They're supporting with their siblings' studies, they're doing everything. Meanwhile, us, we're just sticking to our studies and trying to figure out our life. I would say COVID-19 and economic crisis in a way, not in a way, that's the only reason that we are lagging, because we lagged in those 2-3 years. So it's still kind of, it's showing in our progress.
Right. And you mentioned something very interesting. I can't blame you for saying all of those points because it is very valid,
Yeah.
right? Everything is expensive. But you mentioned something very interesting in terms of employment, right? Right now in Sri Lanka, the workforce is very, very shaky, if I would put it that way. It's super, super shaky, right? You get a job, they start you off with like 45,000 rupees max. You will be out of that 45,000 rupees by in just one day because everything is expensive, right? So that is a key factor when it comes to the employees who are from the previous generation, because that is very interesting. I'm going to say this, right? Whoever is listening right now as well, who are the bosses, the CEOs, Chalada, all of that, right? They bring this example of being like, I started my job and just earned only 1,000 rupees. I was able to work for that the entire month. It does not apply now in the current context because you can't even survive it. Maximum you would need for a normal distance is at least 100,000 rupees to survive. That is bad, right? That is absolutely bad. So I'm going to ask Yasir, because you're employed as well, right? I want to know what is your take on this? Because I know for sure a lot of people would say what you're getting now is enough, right? What someone else is getting is enough, but it's not enough. It's not at all. So what do you have to say about this?
Well, what we have to realize is that the increase of wages haven't kept up with the increase of cost of living. That's why we are in this predicament now. And that mainly has to do with the economy of this country. And a lot of Western countries and countries a lot of people are migrating to do have a cost of living crisis also, but they are like the previous generation of of us have done the necessary steps in order to make sure that the next generation have the ability to be independent. Our generation in Sri Lanka, our parents and our leaders who are of the previous generations haven't done that. That is why people are leaving. That is why Gen Z is angry actually with the country, honestly. A lot of my friends and Gen Z in general is fed up with how the country's being run, how people are thinking, their thinking patterns and everything. They are fed up with that. And when we have a reaction to that, whatever
your outburst, because that is natural.
And that is natural, and we can't be blamed for that, for the mistakes of our forefathers. And especially when it comes to economics, it takes generations to build up a good economy, and we are in this stage now. We can't afford things. We can't live like we are surviving. We are in survival mode 100% of the time, and the only time we can live is realistically if we do it be in a career field for more than 10 years. When we are in our 30s, We can definitely live our life, but up until then, we'll have to just survive. And that's the ground reality of the country now. And people are seeing, someone in Australia is 22, he's traveling the world, and he's doing that by himself. And someone in this country can never afford to do that. So they are obviously the realistic and the logical solution is to move. So they are doing that. And we can't be called selfish for that because it's not our fault. If no one in this country would leave willingly. Everyone I know that has left saying like, oh my God, it sucks here. But if it was like the economic situation, the social situation was better in this country, everyone, literally everyone who had went abroad would come back. They would. No one likes leaving their homeland. That's the reality. No one does. We are left with no solution. The only thing that we have to do is leave. And I don't think we can be blamed for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a very, very validated, wow. Like genuinely, because I actually relate to that a little bit more as well, to be honest, on a very deeper note. But Yasir, that's very interesting that you mentioned that. But what is the solution? What do you think the generations watching now who've actually maybe caused this predicament, what can they do? What is your thing that they can actually resolve?
The first thing is to stop blaming us. Because
judging us, rather.
Yeah, judging us. That's not going to achieve anything. And to come to our shoes, put on our shoes and see it from our perspective. We are doing the things that we are doing for a reason. And it's not because we are being bratty or we are being
annoying.
Yeah. There is a logical explanation to the way we are thinking and where we are behaving. They need to understand that. That's the first step. And the people in the power has to do everything. Like Gen Z and the coming generations. They will run the country one day, and the previous generations have to make sure that we love our country. We have no reason to hate it, and if they are not, that is the most important thing. The next generation. And if they are not doing that...
Okay, I'm going to cut you off there, Yasir, because, I feel like another factor that actually contradicts what you're saying as well is the fact that, the youth, right? They sort of, even if they get a job, they jump from another job to another job to another job to another job. By in a period of 1 year, they've already had like 6 jobs. Okay, not from just the internship, right? And that in itself is very contradictory because people are like, no, you have to eat and bite the hardship, the bone, go through the adversity in one company, right? One company, be there for like 5, 7, 8 years. Establish yourself, then you'll be getting a good sum of money, then you're established and everything. But in our mindsets, personally for me as well, right? This applies to me as well, where I don't want to actually do the same line of work that you did. I don't want to work under someone. I want to work under myself. I want to be the boss of my own business, right? And that's what I want to do, because then I can call the shots. I can travel whenever I want. I don't have to wake up in the morning, early in the morning and come to work, These are things that we want to change. So we are the pinnacle of changing that sequence that we've been following for generations and generations and generations back. But because that thing is changing, because our mindsets are changing as well, we want to change it. The generations think they're going to be the failures. They're the ones that are going to destroy the entire world for that matter, or the nation as well, right? So what is your take on that? But I want to ask that from Sanami actually. What do you think personally?
So when it comes to what you said and also what Yasiru was talking about how we value our lifestyle, say, or the choices we make, and also how the previous generations judge this. So I see this in a problem of responsibility as well as a problem of entitlement. Because a lot of older generations would say that we are entitled. But the problem here is that our generation has been basically coddled as children or during our school life. So they expect us to suddenly take on responsibility. However, throughout our lives as school children, we were given a scenario, we were given, this is how you ought to behave. We were treated like, not as humans, but more as like cogs in a machine. And suddenly, when all the economic crises start falling on us, when all these problems start happening in our country, they say, in our generation, by this time, we were so mature, we were so responsible. However, they were the ones who did not allow us to make decisions at a young age. They made all of our decisions for us. So at school, you would have such little freedom to, express your own individuality. And therefore, you felt like someone was constantly not really guiding you, but giving you a set of guidelines, more like, on how you should behave. So then you sort of lose that sense of individuality and the sense of responsibility as a person. Like, I am supposed to behave like this. This is how I should contribute to the society. Instead, you're like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I will do it, and then I will be silent. So because of this is why our generation feels so rebellious, and at the same time, we feel so pressurized because the other generations want us to be suddenly responsible and take care of our lives, but at the same time, we are not used to it at all because they've...
Sanami, I'm going to cut you off there a little bit, right? Because from what I hear, all I hear is basically you're someone else that's going to listen to it, right? Especially that generation that we're talking about. They're going to be like, these kids are just complaining, that's what they're doing. But you have something that I want you to sort of compare it, right? That generation, in Sri Lanka specifically, have actually gone through the worst turmoil in the country, the war, right? The civil war. They went through it. There is a bombing. At least COVID-19, we were just like cuddled in the house and we were stuck in the house. We couldn't leave, right? Yes, we lost like a huge prime portion of our lives. Economic crisis, yes, we had to go and fight. We weren't able to afford things. We had to walk and whatnot, right? But at least we didn't know, at least we knew there was not going to be a bomb or something that's going to pop out or, dose off or we're going to die, right? They survived the worst. So for us, how can we compare? How can you personally compare the both of those?
Yeah, so that's very interesting, and it's something that I want to add on to what I was saying to kind of clarify. So the difference between these two occasions, the difference between our previous generations and how they faced the war, and the difference of us and how we face these crises, is that at that time, that generation was given a responsibility, or they were allowed individuality. So even if you were 20, 21, you would be facing the bombings, you would be taking care of your younger siblings, you would be looking out for society. Meanwhile, what we did was we were shut inside the house. I think most of the modern generation, their mother bought us tea in the morning, we would just be on the laptop. There is a vast difference because the previous generations were forced to be responsible. They were forced to be mature. However, we were forced to be coddled and forced to be sort of not the decision makers of our own destiny. Because back then, people were allowed to make decisions regarding what was happening. The youth was allowed to decide what was happening in the country. Were we allowed to decide what was happening during COVID? Were we allowed to voice up what was happening during the economic crisis? We just looked like actors in a play, and we were allowed like some time to just, talk to the TV or play a drama.
Right. Again, I'm going to cut you off there a little bit.
Sure.
Because it's interesting that we're actually having this ideation, right? But then you mentioned something, the fact that you weren't able, but economic crisis, the youth was the voice that actually changed this turmoil that we had in the country. So you did have a voice. Before, in the previous generation, during the war, during all of the political agendas that were going on, the youth did not have a voice. They did not have a voice. Yeah. You guys have a voice in this generation. You're the ones who actually love to make the changes because you guys are rebellious. So what is your take on that? Like, what is the...
So again, to address what you're saying, so the difference between, again, these two is that I personally feel, and I don't know if you all will agree, but I feel like that voice, as opposed to like what happened during the war and all, what we did was just voiced our opinions through art, through dance, through music, but we did not actually take any real decisions or any real actions. As compared, it felt, I agree, there were decisions, but the way it impacted us, for us, it felt more like a stage drama. Or like the consequences were different. We did have some sort of, let's say, with the economic crisis, we had much better chance of like voicing out our opinions. But before that, when it comes to COVID and all, we had already been shaped in a certain way where it was a bit difficult to
Okay,
understand
suddenly,
responsibility.
this whole victim mindset, right? Because like what I hear, okay, or someone else that's going to listen to
Yeah.
it is going to be like, okay, they're victimizing it. They're just being the victims. They're trying to be the victims. They're just being such victims, and
Yeah.
that's how they look at us.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how they look at all of you guys as well. When you guys like, voice your opinions or what you
Yeah.
feel. It's also to do with mental health, right? Something
Yeah.
that the previous generation has actually suppressed so much. We'll talk a little bit more on the other side because it's very interesting that you mentioned that as well, right here on Gen XYZ. Well, thank you so much once again, guys, for actually doing this with us, to talk about the real problems in 2025 for the youth of Sri Lanka. Well, this is Gen XYZ. We'll jump into a short commercial break right here on Other Derana 24. Welcome back to Gen XYZ right here on Other Derana 24. Well, we're in conversation with youth members of Sri Lanka that has actually gone through so much, and specifically in the generation of Gen Z, aka the I generation. Well, we spoke a lot about it actually. We were retaliating, we were going back and forth, and I love it because this is the part of sharing ideations. Well, I know that you mentioned something that in the lines of, the victim mindset of things, which I want to bring up, right? Because it's being a victim. That's what they're going to basically say. You're being a victim, you're bringing this whole victim mindset, change it, pull your socks up, pull your life up, get your life going. That's the ideation. Now, I know you mentioned something off of the camera that you wanted to mention that was a little contradictory to what you said. Please.
Yeah, so since kids, we were actually spoon-fed. What subjects to take on school, what school to go, and for O-levels and A-levels, okay, these are the subjects you should do, and for A-levels, these should be the subjects you should be choosing, and this is going to be your career, and these are the subjects you should do to get onto that career. So far, we were not actually allowed to make decisions for ourselves. That I agree with her. But I don't think we are trying to play the victim, because we are not victims actually. We get it. The previous generation went through the entire war, but they were born with the war. They were used to it. They had the...
You were born with the war too.
Yeah.
All of you were born with the war.
Yeah.
So,
but growing up, they had it with them. For example, my mom's from Jaffna. They had all the economic crisis back then in Jaffna. We are facing it now right here, but they had it back then. I can remember my mom saying 1 kilo of potato were 1,500 or something back then. But they had money coming from other countries because the relatives were abroad. So they had...
No.
At least in my parents' scenario.
So we're talking about the masses, right? So
Yeah.
I feel like still there's a problem. It's a little problematic from what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because it's not creating your cause of, fighting, saying that I'm not a victim when it's not the whole thing. So, yeah?
Yeah, we are not victims, as in we are not victims, because we had the courage to voice out for our rights when the government was not right, maybe. We had the courage to voice out, and how can a victim do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are not victimizing ourselves. We are vocal about what we are going through. Is that not a positive thing?
Okay. So it is positive, right? But at the end of the day, I want the psychologist to take the mic because I'm going to ask you this question. It is a positive thing, right? Yes. But at the end of the day, if you're voicing too much of what you're feeling, geez, it's coming to the top of the brim. And that's like you're just complaining about it. That is the mentality. But something that you mentioned that is very interesting is the fact that, the generation doesn't understand. You guys had, trauma, you had all of these things, but you never voiced it, you suppressed it, right? So you being a psychologist professionally as well, what do you have to say about this?
Okay, so I would like to kind of point back to something we talked about, which was about being self-conscious. But I think what we as a generation we are very self-aware. We are self-aware about our feelings, our emotions, and also I think this is because of technology, and we've like from a young age, we know what's out there, like what's on the other side. In Western countries, we know what's happening. And we know what we are going through isn't normal. What our parents and the generations before that failed to recognize is that they didn't have options. We know that there are options out there. We're just frustrated because we can't get there. And also, we are self-aware enough to connect the dots. Like, okay, this happened in our past. This is something that's coming up because of this. Like, again, I know, like, I'm pretty sure, like, if my mother or if my parents, relatives, they're watching this, they'll be like, oh my God, here she goes about trauma again. But the thing is, it's very valid. Trauma, and I know, like, so personally and also like professionally, I've studied about this. So PTSD is very real. But
That's,
also,
if you can tell what the people
yes,
that means.
so that's like
Post-
post-traumatic distress. And anyway, one might argue like the trauma that the older generations went through because of the war is much more bigger and more impactful, and yet they are so functional, so why can't you all do the same? But also, you cannot compare trauma. You can compare the symptoms, but you cannot decide, oh, one trauma is bigger than the other. So it's not dependent of the situation, it's independent of the situation. Like whatever the bad experience, it could be a bad childhood, it could be surviving the Easter bombings, it could be being so stressed because of online classes, or like, for example, not having the resources to join online classes and go through your studies.
Right. Krishnani, I'm going to cut you off there. I think the main aspect that people don't understand is mental health, right? People did have mental health in the previous generations as well, and generations back. But the thing is, they suppressed it. And that's one of the reasons why they're, these rigid people like robots that function through life. Yeah.
And they're not self-aware about it.
True. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
so just to give you a small anecdote, I was talking to actually a psychologist the other day who's from Jaffna. And he told me about how he had survived the war as a child and had almost got himself killed because of like he was traveling in a bus and the bus had got bombed and all of that. And then he concluded the conversation, but would you say that I'm traumatized? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's complete. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so, and being a psychologist, so it's suppressed to the point that even though they've learned about this, they're like, no, I'm not affected by that, because they had no other option. But we kind of know the options, and we are very self-aware, like when it comes to how we go through life. For example, the day-to-day decisions we have to make, we're like, okay, if like a very small thing, like how would this affect me? And like how this makes me feel, and how would the other people around me would feel. We are very conscious about this. So I don't think we're necessarily selfish. And also I don't think we see ourselves as victims. It's more about knowing what we've gone through and alluding to the fact we are the way we are because of what we've gone through.
Right.
So you cannot be blamed for that.
Now, you mentioned something very interesting, actually. I cannot detach the facts from, what it actually is, right? Because you mentioned in terms of you being aware of the things, there are other options. If you have other options, why do you want to go with where you are? If you have other options, if you have to go to another country and it's better life there, you might as well go there. Why do you want to stay here, stagnant, suffer through all of these things? That's not the life that you want for yourself, because we all have one life, yeah? So that's very interesting that you mentioned, but I want to pass the mic a little bit towards Yasiru a little bit, because I want to talk about mental health once again, because mental health is actually a little bit of a problem right now in Sri Lanka, specifically with this generation. We have school kids, literally, because they can't cope with all of these things, because again, the generation think that we are victims, we're victimizing ourselves and all of that, and then we do actually end up sort of proving them right, if you think about it, right? All of the youth, unfortunately, prove them right because they go, do certain things like jumping out of iconic buildings in Sri Lanka. It's very distressing to even hear these, right? And then it's not even just one, it's like a sequence and the pattern of things. So what do you actually have to say about this?
First, the first thing that I have to mention when it comes to mental health issues and suicides is that we need to stop victim blaming. Sri Lanka, the country, has a strong problem with victim blaming. Whenever something bad happens, they're like focusing on the victim rather than what led this person to commit such a horrible thing. That's the first thing. And I also have to mention, if I were to hypothetically complain about some mental health issue that I was going through, someone of the older generation, the first thing they would say is like, I had the same problem, but I turned out to be fine. And the thing that I always say is, no, you are not fine. You just aren't aware of the things that it led you to do. Unprocessed trauma can lead to unfathomable consequences. They don't realize they are the way they are because of the things that they went through. They don't realize that. They think, oh, I'm fine, so why can't you also be fine? That's not how it works. We are aware of the problem, and we rather than shutting it out, rather than suppressing it, we are trying to find a solution that would not make us emotionally numb, and that would actually
help you.
Yeah, help us and process the trauma. That's what we are doing, and obviously it's seen as complaining. And complaining mainly.
And being a victim of it, basically.
And being a victim.
Thank you, yes, sir. Thank you so much for actually mentioning that, and thank you all of you as well for actually bringing this to light, right? I want to, before I conclude, and we've come to, I would say a very unfortunate conclusion, because I think there's a lot that we can actually talk about, right? Probably in another episode as well. But until then, in one sentence, I want all of you to tell the people watching, the previous generation as well, one thing that you actually want to say that would impact them. Yeah? Let's start with you, Yasser.
Okay, it's really hard to summarize everything. But I mentioned this before. It would be to see it from our perspective. Right. We are doing this we are the way we are for a reason, and come see it as from our perspective. That's what I have to say.
All right, thank you so much, Yasser. And if you can pass the mic and ask Sanami, what do you actually have to say in one sentence that would impact the generation?
So my sentence would be to trust us to take responsibility, because we all want to take responsibility. We all want to contribute. So please trust us as a generation instead of, blaming us and looking
Judging
at us from this different eye. Let us take some,
Thank you so much. And yes?
Yeah, so I'm going to address it to my generation. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, be yourself, and you'll figure it out eventually.
Wow, thank you so much.
Everyone, including the Gen Zs, we all should leave our prejudices aside and try to understand each other. I think that's what helps.
Fantastic, Indra. Thank you so much. And what do you have to say?
Just don't blame a courageous generation of certain stuffs. If you can't be nice, at least don't be anything. Just
stay where you are and let us stay where we are.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Thank you once again for all of you to actually come today and really do this and speak the voices of your generation as well. So we'll probably do this on a different note as well, because I feel like there's a lot more ideations that we can actually pass through as well, and give your voices so people can watch it, right? And really understand you guys as well on a deeper note. So thank you so much once again. And with that, this is an end on Gen XYZ right here on Other Than 24. Well, in case you're wondering where we are, it's Brew by Dilma. It's a beautiful location, by the way, located at Flower Road. And once again, don't forget, if you do miss out on an episode, we are available on youtube.com/OtherThanEnglish. And with that, catch you on a different episode right here on Gen XYZ.